Sentenced to Earth? Falling for a human? Forbidden. But irresistible asterisk the package Earth sent was. Impressive. They thought humans were crude, loud, maybe even a little dangerous. Emotionally unstable, sure, but manageable. The Varelian Consortium had requested a diplomatic envoy, expecting a nervous scientist or some skinny ambassador with a handshake and a data pad. They got Rick Dalton, 6'4", broad shoulders, ex-Marine, and packing heat both in attitude and anatomy. When the shuttle doors hissed open and Rick stepped onto the polished deck of the Varelian flagship, every sensor in the room pinged. High Matron Zelai blinked. Not once, twice. Her retinal overlay glitched for a second as her biofeedback scanner went wild. The human male's hormone profile was so intense, her system thought he was in a permanent state of mating readiness. Her assistants looked at her in silent confusion as she took an involuntary step forward. Rick gave a slow nod, his deep voice cutting through the still air. Ambassador Rick Dalton, representing Earth and all that. He adjusted his belt. The motion made several nearby Varelians gasp quietly, not at his voice, not at his title. At the sheer density of the man, he had no idea. Zella cleared her throat, her voice smooth but slightly tighter than usual. We are honored by your presence, Ambassador Dalton. She meant it. Very honored. She just wasn't sure what she was more intrigued by his diplomatic mission, or the bulge that had its own gravitational field. Varelians were a matriarchal society. Their males were smaller, quieter, and honestly, more decorative than functional. Most had to be medically stimulated to maintain reproduction cycles. Pleasure was scientific, scheduled. So when Rick sat down in the negotiation hall with his legs spread wide and a lazy, confident smirk on his face, he was unknowingly committing a war crime of attraction. For Varelians, his posture was a mating stance. For Rick, it was just how chairs worked. Later that evening, Zalay offered him a private dinner in her chambers, purely to discuss political matters. Of course. The room was softly lit, the atmosphere controlled, and the wine chilled. She had ordered sensors installed under the table to track his vitals. Just to be sure her readings weren't broken, they weren't. Rick was a biological outlier in every category. Testosterone levels 23 times higher than the average. Varelian male. Resting heart rate like a jungle predator. And that bulge wasn't just for show. Our scanners picked up blood flow rates that would make a war beast blush. And he wasn't even aroused yet. He was chewing steak. Interesting meat, Rick said, glancing down at the strange, glowing blue cut on his plate. You eat yours? Zalai replied, her voice dipping low. She wasn't talking about the food anymore. Rick chuckled. Guess that's a human thing. She sipped her wine to hide the heat, flushing through her bioluminescent skin. Yes, among many other things. A silence stretched between them. Not awkward, but thick with unspoken interest. Rick leaned forward, the muscles in his chest. Pressing against the front of his Earth-issued uniform, Zalay's eyes flicked down, her tail twitched. She hadn't twitched in years. So what's the real reason you invited me here? Rick asked, his tone casual but curious. Zalai hesitated. She could say diplomacy. She could say cultural exchange. But instead, she took a breath and said, I wanted to understand your kind. Look up close. Rick smiled. Well, here I am. Close, her breath caught. A drop of her wine spilled onto the table, evaporating instantly in the heat from her fingers. She activated a fan discreetly. Her body temperature had just spiked 3 degrees. The pheromone sensors in the ceiling went into alarm mode. He didn't know it yet. But Rick Dalton had just become the most desirable male in the known galaxy. He reached for his drink and caught her watching. She didn't look away. Got very intense eyes, he said. And you, she said slowly, have very intense everything. Rick grinned. You flirting with me, High Matron? She didn't answer with words. Instead, she stood, walked slowly around the table, and stopped behind him. Her hand rested gently on his shoulder. He tensed not from fear, but from the deep, instinctive awareness that something very different was happening. I've never felt like this, she whispered. He turned slightly to meet her gaze. Is that a good thing? Her voice was husky, a tremble in her throat. We're about to find out. And just like that, peace talks were postponed. Diplomacy would have to wait. Because what Earth had sent was more than an ambassador. He was a revelation. Rick Dalton had no idea just how deep the rabbit hole went. The next morning, he woke up not in his quarters but in a luxury suite on the Varelian High. Spire, satin walls, silk sheets, and a faint scent in the air that smelled like spiced moonlight. Or maybe that was just her lie. She wasn't in the room, but her presence lingered like static electricity. Rick sat up, shirtless, his torso catching the morning sun streaming through the crystal-paneled windows. He stretched, scratched his jaw and muttered, "This is the weirdest diplomatic mission I've ever been on. And I've been to Jupiter's third moon with 2 diplomats and a goat." A soft chime sounded. The doors opened. In walked Zilla. She wasn't wearing her formal robes today. No, today. She wore something flowing, dark, and dangerously transparent. Her silver skin shimmered beneath it, patterns glowing faintly across her thighs and collarbones. Varelian body language was different, subtle, coded through bioluminescence and scent, but Rick was picking up the basics. This was definitely not a business call. "Ambassador Dalton," she said, her voice low, almost purring. Rick stood, and for a moment, they just looked at each other. He was used to being the big, intimidating one in the room. Marines didn't exactly learn how to navigate flirtation with telepathic alien queens, but even without training, instincts kicked in. "Call me Rick," he said, stepping closer. "Unless we're in front of a crowd, then you can call me Ambassador." Package. Just to keep things professional. She blinked again. He was beginning to love that look, confused awe, laced with growing amusement. A bit of heat. "Your species is surprising," she said, circling him slowly now, as if studying an ancient artifact.
Ow.
"When we requested a representative, we expected someone with technical credentials. Perhaps genetic subtlety we didn't expect." Miss Rick arched an eyebrow. "Didn't expect what, exactly?" Zilly paused behind him, her fingers brushing his shoulder. He could feel the warmth of her body through that thin slip of alien fabric. "You're physically incompatible with every mating standard we've cataloged. Too large, too potent. Our mail carriers struggle with minimal effort. But your scans ... show no limits." Rick turned to face her, voice calm but teasing. "Let me guess. I break your charts." She didn't deny it. She simply stepped closer, their bodies nearly touching. "In fact," she whispered, "some of our med scholars believe your biology evolved entirely around ... performance, not survival. Performance." "Well," Rick said with a grin, "we are a very determined species. Once we set our minds and other parts to something..." She actually laughed, soft, melodic, full of strange clicking undertones. K and gods. That laugh hit him harder than any combat stimulant. "Tell me something, Rick," she said. "Is it true human males experience pleasure even during bonding?" "Depends on the partner," he said, his voice dropping. "But yeah, that's part of the fun." Zalai looked stunned. Her kind viewed physical intimacy as a responsibility for reproduction. It was procedural, medicinal even. Idea of enjoying it, that was scandalous. "You find pleasure, closeness. We crave it," he said. "It connects us, mind and body, not just to reproduce, but to love." That word love, it didn't exist in Varelian. She stared at him like he had just uttered the secret to bending time. "I've read of that word," she said quietly. "A human emotion, unquantifiable, dangerous." "Yeah," Rick replied, "but worth every risk." A long pause followed. Her chest rose and fell gently, her markings beginning to pulse with color. That was new. Lights danced in hypnotic patterns. Rick didn't need a translator to know what they meant. Zella stepped in and pressed her palm to his chest, right over his heart. "Then show me," she whispered. show me this love you speak of." He didn't answer with words. That night, the Varelian palace security sensors recorded energy spikes that couldn't be explained by any of their systems. Biochemical surges. Even the planet's moon wobbled slightly. In its orbit, likely a coincidence, but rumors spread quickly. In the following days, Zilly glowed brighter. She moved differently, looser, lighter, and oddly satisfied. Her advisors were concerned. Her assistants started whispering. One even filed a report with the Varelian Health Council titled "Human Mating Patterns and Their Political Consequences." Rick. He just kept eating steak and smiling like a man who didn't know he'd just altered the course of interstellar relations. Then came the fallout. Zillus. Kana's status scan revealed a shock that no one expected, not even her. She was fertile. Hyperfertile. And the DNA signature confirmed it. Cross-species compatibility. Viable, healthy, off 2 charts potential. The egg had formed, and the father was Earth's ambassador of surprise. A meeting was called. The Senate buzzed with panic. This was unheard of, impossible, outrageous. The matron carrying a hybrid seed? What did it mean for lineage? For control? For the future of the consortium? Zilay entered the chamber alone. Regal, confident, pregnant. She faced them all with one phrase that silenced the room. "I did not fall, I chose." And somewhere in the background, Rick watched the chaos unfold, chewing a piece of Varelian fruit, totally unaware that he'd just become the most dangerous and desired man in the galaxy, and the galaxy had no idea what Earth might send next. Asterisk Rick Dalton wasn't trained for this. Sure, he could handle combat, alien terrain, diplomatic tensions, and even zero-G firefights. But navigating the aftermath of impregnating the High Matron of an interstellar empire? Yeah, that wasn't in the Marine Corps manual. It all started with a spoon. 2 mornings after the incident, or as the Varelian tabloids were now calling it, the night of unmeasured diplomacy, Rick was trying to enjoy breakfast. Alien. Fruit. Some kind of glowing syrup. A protein slab that tasted like grilled regret. But the spoon was tiny, designed for delicate Varelian hands. Not a human ex-Marine who could bend steel with his jawline, he snapped the spoon in half by accident. Everything. Here's just so... ... Dainty, Rick muttered, eyeing the broken utensil like it had personally offended him. Zilay, sitting across from him wrapped in a flowing gown of living silk, arched a glowing brow. Right, larger than expected. In many ways, she wasn't. Just talking about the spoon, Rick leaned back in his chair, which creaked ominously under his weight, and grinned. "Still can't believe I'm the first human to knock up a Varelian leader." Her expression softened. "Not just any leader. The leader. They've already renamed a lunar observatory after you." "You're kidding, I'm not." He blinked. "They named a moon tower after my ... efforts. Dalton Cradle Station." She sipped her tea. "A tribute to your..." Rick just stared at her. "You people name things fast." She smirked. "You perform fast." He nearly choked on his fruit. But beyond the flirtation, things were getting complicated. The consortium's ruling Senate was in full meltdown. The matron hadn't just bonded with a human, she was carrying a half-human child. One with unknown genetic strength, unpredictable hybrid traits, and possibly the capacity to bridge the 2 species in ways science hadn't dreamed of. For some, this was evolution. For others, it was heresy. "They're holding an emergency summit in 3 days, Zilay said, tracing her finger slowly along the edge of her glass. "They'll likely demand I terminate the pregnancy or step down." Rick tensed. Terminate. What they do when unions are politically disruptive. Yeah. Well, tell them they can shove that protocol up their cold-blooded. They're not cold-blooded. They act like it. Zilay placed a calming hand on his. "Rick... ... You've given me something they never have. Not just life. Hope." He looked at her hand, slender, glowing softly, resting atop his. She was an alien matriarch with political power spanning 7 systems. Yet, in this moment, she was just a woman. A scared, strong, brilliant woman with a child growing inside her that no data model had ever accounted for. "You're not giving it up," Rick said flatly. "No." "Then I'm staying right here." Zilly smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." He stood up. "I'll be damned if some glowing senators try to bully you into throwing away our kid. They'll have to go through me first." She rose with him, eyes shining. "They may try," and they did. 3 days later, the summit chamber, an enormous, floating sphere suspended above the Varelian capital, filled with hundreds of delegates, advisors, and politically anxious beings. Rick stood next to Zalai in a formal tunic tailored for him that barely fit his chest. She stood tall, regal, one hand gently resting on her belly. The chamber buzzed with tension. Then a senator, old, crusty, and probably allergic to joy, stood and sneered, "You dare bring this mammalian, outworlder, into our sacred halls?" Rick grinned.
Nice.
"To meet you too, Senator." Another one chimed in. "His genetics are disruptive. His body is incompatible with our evolutionary goals. Look at him. He's ... huge." Rick shrugged. "Sorry we don't come in, petite." Gasps echoed through the hall. "He will dominate our population, if allowed to breed freely." "Shh. Whoa, whoa," Rick said, raising a hand. "No one said anything about free breeding. Let's not get ahead of ourselves." Zalai remained calm, composed. "He has done what none of your select males could. He bonded willingly. He passed every physical, biological, and cognitive threshold without augmentation." The Senate roared in argument, and, she added, voice hardening, "He made me feel something none of you have. Choice." That silenced them. Rick leaned over and whispered, "Damn, you're good." She didn't smile. "We're not finished yet." Then came the challenge in Varelian law. Disputes like this could be settled through something called Ravatok, a public physical trial. Not combat, not violence, but biological endurance. Test of stamina, adaptability, and, shall we say, reproductive fitness. Rick agreed before they finished the explanation. He didn't know there'd be a treadmill involved. They strapped biosensors to his chest, measured oxygen intake, pheromone resistance, neurological balance. There was even a section where he had to smell Varelian arousal triggers and not faint. He passed them all. In fact, he broke 2 machines. By the end, the Senate had nothing left to say, except stare in stunned silence as Rick wiped his forehead and said, "So, do I get a medal, or is this where I get to name the baby?" The vote passed by 1 point. Zalai was allowed to retain her title. The pregnancy would continue. Rick would stay, now formally titled Consort Protector of the Matron Bloodline. He'd never been called consort before. It made him sound fancy. Later that night, as they watched the Varelian moons rise from their private balcony, Zalai leaned into his arms and whispered, "You realize what this means, don't you?" Rick grinned, holding her close. "That I just saved a civilization, using nothing but charm, stubbornness, and a very generous set of genes." She kissed him. "Yes, that." And from the darkness beyond, somewhere deep in the stars, other species were watching, learning, whispering. What else might Earth be hiding? Down there. And they were only just beginning to find out. Asterisk word had spread. It started with whispers in the outer colonies. Then datapads lit up across the galactic network. Reports, sensor logs, even blurry holopics circulated with captions like, "The human did what? Varelian matron impregnated by Earth male, possible super hybrid, breaking Earthmen too big for science." Rick Dalton had become a legend, and he didn't even have a social media profile. Back on the Varelian homeworld, things had calmed down for now. The Senate, after reluctantly allowing Zeli to keep both her throne and her child, tried to spin the incident as a unique diplomatic exchange. Their version was stiff, clinical, and conveniently left out the night Rick broke to testing machines just by existing. Meanwhile, Rick was trying to adapt to his new title, Consort Protector of the Matron Bloodline, which frankly sounded like something out of a fantasy novel. or a high-budget adult film. He still didn't know if he was supposed to bow to people or punch them. Do I salute the priests, or just nod?
Add.
Rick asked one morning while brushing his teeth in front of a mirror that adjusted to his height. Every time he leaned over, because yesterday one of them hissed at me. They were hissing in respect, Zalay said from the bed, draped in a robe that looked like woven galaxy mist. It's a fertility gesture. Fertility hiss. Got it. Totally normal. Life in the matron's spire was a strange blend of luxury and low-key surveillance. Half the palace was now filled with medical drones, monitoring Zilay's pregnancy. Apparently, no one had expected her to carry two term. Every few days, another scientist would gently beg her to let them scan the embryo again. She let them. And every time, the results stunned them even more. Rick's DNA wasn't just compatible. It was dominant. The child developing inside Zilai was healthy, rapidly advancing, and showing signs of neural acceleration that baffled the doctors. Her heart rate is twice ours, one physician muttered, shaking her head. Her bones are denser, said. Another, she kicked me through a bioshield, said a third, rubbing his stomach. Rick tried not to gloat, but it was getting harder. Look, I'm not saying I'm special, he said. Lounging in a hot spring, while palace guards watched nervously from a distance. But maybe next time someone calls Earth primitive, remind them we invented chili dogs and hybrid galactic messiahs. The truth was, Rick was starting to feel a little pressure. He didn't sign up to be the father of a cross-species miracle. He just thought he'd come to give a few speeches, wave some flags, maybe smooch a diplomat on the cheek if things got spicy. Instead, he'd accidentally jump-started the next phase of Varelian evolution. No big deal. Zelly, on the other hand, was glowing. Literally, her skin shimmered with energy no one could explain. She was stronger, faster, and occasionally her voice made furniture vibrate. The baby was changing her, enhancing her, mating with a human. Wasn't just revolutionary, it was transformative. At night, the two of them lay together, tangled under alien silk and starlight. You're not scared? Rick asked one evening, tracing a glowing line down her shoulder. I was, she admitted softly. But you've shown me what choice feels like, what love is, what it means to be with someone who sees you. Not as a ruler or a symbol, but as a person. Rick didn't say much. He just kissed her, slow and full of the kind of weight that didn't need words, and then the requests started coming. Delegations from other species, emissaries, research, envoys, all wanting to meet the human. The one who had done the impossible? Not just impregnate an alien queen, but make her fall for him. The Andari offered to fund an interspecies fertility program. The Tralexian Confederacy offered weapons in exchange for a DNA sample. The Zarniks offered themselves. Rick was getting fan mail from every corner of the galaxy. Some of it romantic, some of it straight up unprintable. His favorite? Dear Ambassador Dalton, I am the 9th daughter of Hive Cluster Kadek. My sisters and I believe you may be the key to revitalizing our stagnating broodline. To come in peace and ovulation. Caesarly Slurica. Katak Rick turned to Zeely after reading it. So, is polygamy a Varelian thing? Or she snatched the datapad and deleted it? No. Despite the chaos, their bond only grew deeper. There were arguments, of course, like when Rick tried to install a barbecue grill on the palace balcony at ceremonial. He insisted. Or when Zelai tried to mind scan his dreams without asking. But they always found their way back. To each other, and then, during a quiet morning meditation session, Rick mostly sat on a pillow pretending to concentrate. Zelai gasped. Her hand flew to her belly. The palace lit up red dot. The baby wasn't in distress. She was ready. 3 weeks early, Varelians carried for 6 months. But Rick's child, she had other plans. She was punching the inside of the womb like she was ready for the universe. Hold on, Rick said, pulling on a tunic. I thought we still had a month. She's human, Rick. Zelai groaned, gripping his hand. Of course she's impatient. Dozens of medics scrambled. Ceremonial birthrights were canceled. The official royal birthing song was interrupted mid-harp. Nothing about this was traditional, which honestly is perfect. because when little Lyra Dalton was born, half human, half Virelian, fully extraordinary, she didn't cry. She roared. And in that moment, Rick knew one thing with absolute certainty. She had his lungs and Zilly's attitude. The galaxy didn't stand a chance. Asterisk, they named her. Year after, the constellation where Zilly first saw Earth on the interstellar chart, the day she approved the request for a diplomatic envoy, little did she know, she'd been signing up for a full package delivery. From the very first breath, Lyra Dalton wasn't just different, she was impossible. She was born with a strong, steady heartbeat. Tiny fists already clenched with a ferocity that made the delivery drone malfunction. Her skin shimmered with soft silver biolite, like her mother's. But her eyes, those were all Rick. Deep, earthy, stubborn. And the moment she locked eyes with him, Rick felt something he'd never felt before. Not in war, not in training, not even during the night of unmeasured diplomacy, terror, joy, purpose. He was no longer just a man with a legendary reputation and galaxy-bending performance stats. He was a dad. The Virelian Council didn't know what to make of her. They tried to scan her for anomalies, but most of the equipment short-circuited. The baby's immune system actively rejected synthetic readings. She sneezed once and knocked out an entire wall's worth of sensory panels. Zilly was radiant, glowing with post-birth energy and quiet defiance. She let Rick hold the baby first. "You gave me something our people haven't had in centuries," she whispered. "A child born not from arrangement, not from sterile compatibility, algorithms, but from love." Rick blinked. "Well, to be fair, the love came after the amazing sex." She smiled. "I liked the love better." Rick held Lyra close. "I liked both." The next few weeks were ... intense. Every major galactic power sent a delegation. They didn't just want to see the hybrid child. They wanted to study her, name her, claim her. The Sulari offered to make her heir to their emerald throne. The Karth Collective sent a breeding rights treaty written on organic platinum. Thulian caste mothers sent a politely worded invitation for Rick to attend a mating summit. With snacks, Rick declined. Barely. The Virelian Council issued new edicts overnight. Interspecies unions were no longer banned. They were suddenly scientifically encouraged. Entire departments popped up dedicated to Earth hybrid research. Rick had to shut down 3 sneaky DNA harvest attempts. "I'm not a vending machine, people," he growled, swatting away a drone with a sample cup. Zilly stood firm beside him. She wasn't just the high matron anymore. She was a mother, and that made her even more dangerous. Political opponents tried to argue she'd been manipulated by human pheromones, that Rick was a biological weapon. Of diplomacy, that Earth had invaded by way of bedroom. Zilly crushed them with a single broadcast. No pheromone can create love. No chemical can build family. "I chose this man, and our daughter is proof that our future lies not in isolation, ... but in evolution." That shut them up for a week. Then came the attempted abduction. It happened in the quiet hours of the night, when the palace was bathed in violet moonlight, and Lyra was asleep in her hovercrib beside their bed. Rick had just dozed off, one leg halfway over Zyla, snoring like a bear wrapped in silk. A faint hum triggered the security grid. 2 cloaked figures slipped through the walls using black market. Phase tech, silent, invisible, lethal. They didn't count on the baby being half human. Lyra opened her eyes and screamed. It wasn't a wail, it was a sonic pulse. The first assassin was thrown across the room, crashing through 3 decorative columns and losing 2 teeth on impact. The second reached for the baby only to find himself face to face with a half-naked Rick Dalton wielding a chair like a warhammer. 5 seconds later, both intruders were unconscious. One was missing a finger, the other was missing his will. "To live, Zally?" Calmly handing Rick a towel, asked, "Do you always sleep in your underwear?" "Only when I'm guarding the galaxy's most important baby and the galaxy's sexiest queen," he said. They checked Lyra. She was fine. Her bioluminescence had turned golden, apparently a defensive instinct. She blinked at Rick and gave a gurgle. that to his ears sounded suspiciously like "nice swing, Dad." After the attack, things escalated. Security was doubled. Rick was assigned a permanent honor guard, a team of Varelian female warriors who worshipped him like a living myth. The Senate debated whether Lyra should be declared first of her kind, which would make her immune to legal repercussions for just about anything, including vaporizing an embassy with her sneeze. Zalai started wearing armor during public appearances, not because she feared a threat, but because it looked amazing and made Rick want to skip dinner. They were more than a couple now, more than parents. They were symbols. Earth and Varelia, the unlikeliest bond, the talk of the stars. But none of that mattered to Rick. When he came home every night to the quiet sound of his daughter cooing in her cradle and Sly softly humming songs in a language he didn't understand but never wanted her to stop, he kissed her belly once, joking, "Think we've got another one in there?" She smirked. "Statistically? With you? I'd say yes." Rick chuckled. "Better reinforce the palace. Round two's coming." Across the galaxy, as empires stirred and warlords whispered, and ancient powers watched Earth with new eyes, one truth became clear. Humans weren't just survivors. They were spreaders of culture, of connection, of something a little deeper. And when humanity finally joined the stars, it wasn't with warships or economic domination. It came with a smile, a swagger, and a package that no one in the galaxy could quite measure, forget. Rick Dalton never thought he'd become a symbol, a father. Maybe someday, a lover to an alien queen, not on the bingo card, but a walking, talking galactic turning point. Yeah, that was a surprise. 3 months after Lyra's birth, the palace was anything but quiet. Diplomats, researchers, security patrols, press drones that tried to sneak peeks through the bedroom window. One even caught Rick shirtless on the balcony, holding baby Lyra and drinking protein coffee like a suburban dad in deep space. The photo went viral. The caption, "The Daddy of the Galaxy." Rick didn't hate it. Zilay printed it and framed it in the nursery. But fame has a price. While Zilay managed the political chess game of leading an empire with a half-human daughter at her hip, Rick faced pressure from Earth. The United Terran Assembly sent a representative ambassador, Francine Colt, sharp-tongued bureaucrat who looked like she hadn't smiled since the Pluto Accords. She arrived with 2 aides, 3 lawyers, and a stack of forms so tall. Rick asked if he was being sued or knighted. "Earth has questions," she said, entering the throne chamber without so much as a bow. Starting with, "What the hell have you done, Dalton?" Rick crossed his arms. "Built a family, helped an alien queen change the future, saved a planet. Maybe added a few good genes to the universe." Colt didn't flinch. "You've destabilized interstellar politics. You've created a hybrid child with unknown powers. And this is classified, but 16 alien species have now requested human male donors for diplomatic purposes." Rick grinned. "Popular guy, huh?" She didn't smile. "You're a walking fertility incident, Rick." Zelaya Regal stepped between them. "My child is not an incident. She is the first true bridge between two peoples. And Rick is. Not just her father, he is our protector." Colt turned. "And what happens when your protector becomes a target?" That's when the lights flickered and alarms screamed. The palace shook. Seconds later, a Varelian commander burst in, pale and shaking. "We have a breach. Outer defense grid. It's down." Rick reached for his pulse blaster. "Is this another fan club?" "No," the commander said grimly. "It's the Kriari." Every room fell silent. Even Xyle stiffened. Their myth. Not anymore. The Kriari were ancient, silent, bioengineered weapon species from the dark edges of the galaxy. They didn't ask questions. They didn't make treaties. They harvested pure, cold, evolutionary conquest. They saw the hybrid child as a threat to their supremacy, and they came to erase it. The skies lit up with black ships, organic pulsing. Vessels that looked more like creatures than machines. They weren't broadcasting, they were descending. Rick looked down at Lyra, who was strapped to his chest in a baby sling. She blinked up at the ceiling. utterly unimpressed. "Well," he muttered, "guess nap time's over." The palace defense grid fired first. Energy cannons lit the sky. Kryari drones screamed through the clouds, slamming into shields, claws out. Aurelian warriors scrambled, their curved blades slicing through the air. Rick tossed a rifle to Zio. "You ever shoot one of these?" She caught it in one hand. "I lead this world, Rick, not from a desk." He nodded. "I love you." They kissed hard, fast, reckless, then bolted into the chaos. Rick fought like a man possessed. No armor, no tactical HUD, just grit, muscles, and rage. What Kryari landed near the throne room, towering, sleek, pure black with rows of shifting teeth. Rick tackled it mid-leap, slammed it into a pillar and yelled, "Daddy's home!" Blaster fire echoed. Explosions rocked the palace. Zeely moved like lightning, fighting beside her elite guard, eyes glowing bright white. Her crown burned away in the fire, but she didn't care. Rick reached for Lyra still, swaddled safely in a shielded carrier on his back, and whispered, "Don't worry, kid. Mom and Dad are handling it." But the Kryari didn't stop. They sent something bigger. Something built to extract the hybrid, landed in the heart of the palace. 12 feet tall, 6 arms, designed from the genetic codes of conquered species. A living bio-war machine. Rick stepped forward, cracked his neck, and muttered, "Great." A walking blender. It charged. So did he. They collided with enough force to cave in the floor. The fight was brutal. Rick bled. The creature snarled, claws shredding through marble and fire.
Ow.
But Rick, Earth's first diplomat, Dad held his ground. He ducked, rolled, grabbed a spear, and jammed it into the thing's core. "You don't." "Get my kid," he growled. Behind him, Lyra let out a noise. A scream, not of fear, of power. A wave of gold-blue energy burst from her tiny mouth. A pulse. The Kryari warbeast stopped, then cracked, then exploded. Rick spun, grabbing Lyra as flames roared around them. She giggled. "Well," he muttered, "she's definitely mine." Zalea arrived seconds later, breathing hard, smoke in her hair. Her eyes widened at the ashes. "She's awakening early." She just vaporized a 12-foot biotank with a sneeze. And smiled, Zelai whispered. Together, they stood in the ruins of the throne room, bloody, bruised, but whole. The Kryari ships began to retreat. Not because they were losing, but because they saw what the child could do. Lyra wasn't just a baby. She was the future, the first of her kind. The living proof that love, not war, changed destiny. And from that moment forward, no one in the galaxy would dare look at Earth the same way again. Not after what Earth had made. 3 years later, peace had returned. Not the kind signed with cold ink on treaty documents, but the kind built with laughter, shared meals, the smell of burning meat from Rick's badly constructed alien barbecue, and the pitter-patter of tiny hybrid feet zooming down palace halls. Lyra Dalton was 3 and already a handful, half human, half Varelian, all chaos. She could speak 6 languages, melt through reinforced doors with her mood swings, and fly short distances when she was excited. Rick learned that the hard way when she launched herself off the balcony during breakfast. "She's just soaring with confidence," Zilia had said. "She's frickin' airborne." Rick had yelled, chasing her with a hovernet. But despite the daily near-death surprises, Rick was thriving. He wasn't just consort protector anymore. The title had evolved champion of the Union. A title earned not through political wrangling, but through sheer, ridiculous, unstoppable human will. He still wore cargo pants to Galactic Council meetings, still called alien dignitaries by the wrong names, still grilled meat with spices that made Aurelians faint. But everyone listened when he spoke now, because the man who arrived on a diplomatic mission had helped avert a species war, defeated an interstellar death beast with a spear and a snarky one-liner, and fathered the most powerful child the galaxy had ever seen. Rick hadn't just changed a world. He'd made a family on it, and in doing so, reshaped the future Earth. Once viewed as a backwater mudball with loud music and big trucks, was now a top-tier cultural influence. Varelian fashion started to include leather jackets. Rock music had found its way into elite academies, Somewhere out in the stars, a luxury resort had opened up, offering authentic human experience weekends, complete with steak dinners, bad pickup lines. In competitive wrestling, Rick got royalties, and not just from the restaurants, but from the baby books. Mating the Human Way, Passion, Power, Paternity became a bestseller across 7 systems. Zelly wrote the foreword. "He came in peace. He stayed for me," Rick cried when he read it. Quietly in the shower. With beer, Lyra's powers continued to grow, but she wasn't a weapon. She was a child. Rick and Zella made sure of that. She had lessons, toys, a bed shaped like a star cruiser, and a stuffed animal that she once accidentally made sentient. They adopted it, named him Snarble. Even the old guard Varelian, Senate, came around eventually, after a few were rescued by Rick and Zelli from a rogue asteroid. Rick swore he just punched it slightly. They agreed to a new cultural initiative, the Harmony Accord, an open alliance between Earth and Varelia, focused on love, family, and hybrid futures. That's when other worlds started experimenting, cautiously, with cross-species unions, and you know what? It worked. It turned out humanity's gift wasn't just endurance or biceps or an awkward ability to say exactly the wrong thing at the wrong time. It was love. Messy, raw, unpredictable love. The kind that crossed genetic codes, broke cultural barriers, and made powerful alien queens fall for sarcastic ex-Marines with a crooked smile and a heart too big for his chest. One evening, quiet twin moon sky, Rick stood on the palace balcony, Zalea wrapped around his side, Lyra asleep on his shoulder, snoring like a tiny dragon. "You know," he murmured. "You did more than shake hands," Zelly said, smirking. "I did," he chuckled. "I changed the damn galaxy. All because I showed up, ... and stayed." She leaned into him. "You didn't just stay, Rick. You built something." He kissed the top of her head. They stood in silence, looking out over a city rebuilt from war, bathed in peace, glowing softly with new hope. Down below, couples walked. Some human, some alien, some mixed. A new world. A new generation. Rick reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, shiny piece of metal, his Earth's military tag, long since scorched and faded. "I ever tell you what this says on the back?" he asked. Zelle looked up. No. He held it up to the moonlight. It was scratched, worn, and barely legible, but still readable. "Property of Earth. Do not return without a fight." Rick grinned. "Well, I guess I'm never going back." "It's a lie." Took his hand. "You already won the fight." And he had. For love. For family. For a daughter who would one day lead both species, not as a ruler, but as a bridge. A bright, loud, occasionally levitating bridge who called him Dada and once burned his favorite shirt by accident. It was worth it. Every awkward encounter, every misstep, every flaming, baby-powered explosion, because in the end, humanity didn't conquer the stars with fleets or weapons. It did something even better. It showed up with open arms, stubborn heart, and just the right amount of swagger. And the galaxy would never be the same.